Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ben Crossman, and I hope all of you, I hope you're all doing well, having a great day, and ready for today's show, because we certainly are, where we have a great guest lined up for you, a lot of great news stories, including, I think one of the biggest of the day, and that's going to be the fact that I believe it's Comcast is looking to purchase 21st Century Fox. So, we'll talk about the implications of that. But hey, whenever someone throws around $54 billion, it's a pretty good thing to sit up and take note of. So we have a lot of stories, including that one, and more coming in the second part of the program. But in the first part of the show, you can, of course, look forward to, as per usual, an interview. And today, we have a company called Venafi, and we're going to talk about what they do. We're going to talk about the data that they've collected. They've done a lot of work getting some surveys done, and it's going to be a very fun show today. So a couple of things before we get started, including computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything from the show notes to the website to, of course, it is the website, from the show notes to our guest website to our social media contest brought to you by Logitech and the live video stream, which is brought to you by OWC. So all that and more right there. We also do reviews, we do articles. Hey, it's our own little corner of the internet, and we are very proud of it. So, with that being said, why don't we go ahead and just jump right into this? And waiting oh so patiently in the wings is our guest today. So joining us is none other than Mr. Jeff Hudson. He is the CEO of Venafi. And Jeff, welcome onto the Computer America Show. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Ben. Thank you very much for having me into your, as you called it, own little corner of the internet.
Yeah, it's hey, happy to have you here and happy to speak on a subject that's, honestly, I've been poking through your website. Seems like you guys, kind of threat detection, machine learning, seems like a lot of stuff that could definitely use some clarifying. So I think we have the right person for the job. Why don't we start with the obvious and give us a bit of background on Venafi? When did you guys start? And then a bit of yourself. How did you find yourself working with Venafi?
You bet. So first, a little context to bring some clarity to our mission. There are two actors on a network, as you know, people and machines, and people identify themselves to the network using human identities, mostly usernames and passwords. But then every machine has to talk to other machines. They have to also identify themselves to other machines on the network. They don't use usernames and passwords. Machines talk to each other, identify themselves to each other using machine identities. And as an industry worldwide, we spend about $8 billion a year protecting human identities, and we're just getting started protecting machine identities. As you know, the internet and everything digital is built on machines. So the number of machines is going through the roof. The number of people is relatively flat. The other thing we all know, is identities were meant to be stolen and used in attacks. Bad guys are stealing human identities, and they're stealing machine identities to attack. And they know that they're not being very well protected. So there's this more and more of an attack surface that the bad guys are using. So Venafi invented the technology that protects the machine identities for the world's largest corporations. And these are all the big airlines, 4 of the top 5 banks on 5 continents, all the big healthcare insurers, all the big retailers, big manufacturers. So people that are going through digital transformation, they're building their whole digital world on the top of machines. They know that machines need identities, and those identities need to be protected. So that's what we do.
Right.
Is we protect machine identities. It's a big problem that we're solving.
No, it's a massive problem, and to bring it kind of around to a consumer side, it's the reason why a lot of YouTube algorithms exist, and a lot of what takes down YouTube videos and things like that. It's all automated, and this seems similar in certain ways. And my first question would have to do with the fact that you are doing this with, kind of everything automated, everything machine learning, kind of monitors itself to a certain extent. Why is that preferable rather than hiring personnel? Would the personnel needed to do what an algorithm does, just be unfeasible or not feasible? Or, why are automated processes becoming so important rather than, kind of more people?
Good question. A lot of the systems that are in place today in corporate America, actually in the world, were put in place 15 years ago, 10 years ago. And the speed at which things moved then was really slow compared to today. Just think of one thing. Think of buying a server for a data center. You go back 10 years between the time when you thought, I needed to get a machine for the data center, and you got it installed, it was up and running. Sometimes it was up to 6 months just because you had to go through purchasing and get the hardware put in the data center, certified, all that stuff. Now, how long does it take for someone to provision a server workload, a virtual machine, a virtual server into a cloud, a public cloud? It takes about a second. You can provision 10,000 servers. We have customers doing this all the time for peak load processing. It takes minutes. It's fully automated. So the systems that were in place in the past don't work today. And there's 3 things those systems have to do. They have to have visibility on where all the machine identities are, and they move around. They could be inside the data center. They could be on a public cloud. They could be working on multiple public clouds. So they move around. It could be on a mobile device. It could be on Internet of Things. So all these different kinds of technologies have machines embedded in them, and they all need identity. So visibility, then intelligence. Are those identities good ones or bad ones? Are they going to hurt me or help me? And then finally, the automation piece, which allows for the provisioning of all these identities and then the destruction of all these identities. So that's in a nutshell the answer, and it's all because the world has sped up faster in the last 5 years than it ever has before. And I've been doing this for a while. I've been in high technology my whole life. The speed at which things are happening now in our cyber world is, in the last 5 years, it is going faster than it went in all of time before that. It's phenomenal how fast things are changing.
Yeah, that's not well. I mean, that's a great thing from the capabilities of all the industries that you mentioned before, and then I think that's also the thing that makes a lot of people wary when it comes to the possibilities of what happened on Facebook with Cambridge Analytica, with police surveillance, and in these kinds of technologies. I mean, I think you kind of touched on it where, yeah, it's really cool, especially if you're in the field and you're like, wow, look at all these new toys, and then everyone else is going, yeah, but we're getting hit over the head with them quite a bit. So I guess this is where you also kind of go out, and I see here, we have a couple questions coming up concerning surveys that you do. Looks like you do, a lot of work trying to get, kind of a pulse on, security and management, all this kind of stuff. Let's talk about this one. Let's see, at the RSA conference, and please feel free to fill in all these acronyms, as we get going. The RSA conference this year, you conducted a survey that found that personal encryption is increasing. So talk about those numbers and why that's, important.
So first of all, for those that don't know, RSA is the name of a conference. It's the world's largest security conference where customers and suppliers and people that know a lot get together to talk about things around security. It's held in San Francisco every year. It's been underway, I think, for like 17 years. And this year there were 50,000 people there. 10 years ago, there were 10,000 people there. So you can see what's going on in cybersecurity. That's totally a reflection of the fact that our whole world that was just based on the molecular world, on the real world, the things we know, has going digital, and the bad guys go digital with it. So the bad guys are attacking now because that's where all the value's going. It's moving up into the cyber world, and we as a society don't really understand how much at risk all of the value that we had in the molecular world is now at risk in the cyber world. So anyway, that's what that conference is about. That's why it's growing. The thing that machine identities do, they do two things. One is they provide identities so machines can see, do I trust that other machine or not? Do I know where it came from? Is it a good one or a bad one? One. Second thing they do is they encrypt communications back and forth between these machines. So for people that are listening right now, if you go to a browser, go to your bank, look in the address bar, that's the place where the URL is, that says like Bank of America, there's a little green padlock there that says, okay, my browser knows that I am actually connected to Bank of America, one. So that's the identity piece. Number two is my browser can communicate my bank account number, my passwords, and all that stuff directly to the bank, and through all the machines that we'll have to pass through, nobody can read that information. So it encrypts it along the way. And encryption is increasing like crazy. Why? Because more bad guys are waking up to the fact that unencrypted traffic they can steal. And the public is waking up to the fact that encryption gives you privacy. And privacy is, in a lot of people's minds, an inalienable right. And it can't be taken away by a government without action. So if things aren't encrypted, anybody can look.
So
to your earlier point.
Well, and just real quick, I mean, that's very high-minded, and I'm sure, on an overarching theme that's possibly true. But you have to admit, there's also the aspect of if you don't have HTTPS, Google's going to tank your search rating. I know there's people should care. Like, even if they have nothing to hide, people should care that their data is encrypted because, hey, only certain parties that you would want should be able to see your data. That's a certain thing. I mean, exactly. but there's a commercial side to this as well. Like, encrypted data is safer data, is more, I guess, preferred among, search engines and businesses and enterprises that just want general protection.
It is, and it's one of the whole internet is built on this notion that you can have private communications on the internet between two machines, and that's what machine identities do is give that capability. And what's happening is the federal government, just about everybody, is saying, look, do more of this. Encrypt more things because it's safer, it's more private. So there's a big push to do that, and the bad guys are helping with that. And one other point I want to make is all technology is what I call dual purpose. It can be used to help or it can be used to hurt. And the technology itself is kind of agnostic to that. So the fact that you can encrypt things means that you can have privacy. So if you and I wanted to, our machines needed to talk to one another, they could talk in private. Terrorists can also use that. So their machines can talk in private so nobody can see it. So it's a very interesting world that we have here where this technology actually has two sides.
It is, but I mean that's something that we've had to deal with for the longest time. I mean, even something like a shovel, a much more simple tool.
Absolutely.
It's it can cause great bodily harm, but it can also save
like
you a lot
knife,
of work. Yeah,
like fire
or knife fire.
Every advancement.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep,
but there's a problem. Like there's an innate problem though with security and encryption, where, I mean, there's an article we're going to talk about later on in the program, but it's very topical to what we're doing right now. And this was a Request for Information Act from the EFF, and they found that, I think the FBI said that there were 7,775 unhackable phones that the FBI was trying to gain access to, and it was preventing them from, catching terrorists or, getting on with the investigation, whatever they wanted to do. And turns out that number was conflated by about 500%. Like they way gave a number that was not reflective, but it showed that they were willing to bend the numbers, or I guess you could say lie, to make a point that encryption for law enforcement is a very bad thing. And, and not to get too into politics, but I am with you where, encryption protects us just as individuals and just as a digital society. But there's also another arm of, hey, if we don't have at least backdoors or a way to look into that encryption, law enforcement is very much up in a tizzy. That's a bad thing.
Okay, so I've got a kind of a flip comment, which is
Sure.
If the FBI or any law enforcement wants a backdoor, how can you trust them to protect a backdoor when they can't even count? So they say 7,000 in the numbers you use, 500% less than that.
Right.
Either they lied or they can't count. Either way, right? Do you really want to create a backdoor and give them control over that? And let's just take that off the table now, and let me just say something that's axiomatic. It's first principle.
Sure.
Backdoors destroy security. They absolutely destroy security because a backdoor cannot be kept from the bad guys. It just can't. And that's one. Number two is if government, law enforcement, has a backdoor, that means many parts of government will have a backdoor, which means that surveillance then will go through the roof, which then means that all privacy goes away. And if you look at where you follow the money on all this stuff, what's law enforcement trying to do? What's their job? Why do they get paid? Is to keep the peace. And they're not in the business of saying, well, what's the cost to society to keep the peace? And so if the cost to society is all privacy, so law enforcement sees everything that's ever communicated, we get to keep the peace, they're okay with that. They don't have any moral objection to that. So the moral objection has to come from us, who says, wait a second, one of our rights is privacy, and no, we're not going to create backdoors because that will just absolutely make privacy go away. And there is nobody that can prove that a backdoor will not be leaked and used by others.
Right.
We just know that for a fact. And anybody that says it is, they don't understand, or they're lying.
Right.
That's all there is to it.
No, and I definitely like this train of thought, and it brings us back to to our question here about how 64% of security professionals say that personal encryption usage has increased. That from 45% the previous year. I mean, a 20% jump, it only takes, a couple of years, 20% jumps before a lot of security-minded individuals are jumping on board with this. I mean, I guess this all ties into, again, you mentioned geopolitical changes, but I guess it all ties into, it's just a good thing for, I'm sorry, I should phrase this as a question. Do you think this is a good thing for companies to practice, overarching government takeover excluded, just as a service to their customers, a service to themselves? Do you think that encryption should keep increasing like this?
I absolutely think it should. I absolutely think it will, because I do think that the pressure on companies that have control of individuals' data, and that can be a retailer, a healthcare company, it can be anybody, and that's pretty defined what a controller of data is. Anybody that
Might have lost. Oh, there we
had
go.
a contract with the data control, with the people who own that data, that they're going to take good care of it. And that's getting more and more important because you're seeing more and more people start to say, well, wait a second, Facebook, what about these terms and conditions? You're sharing with, a lot of different people my data unbeknownst to me. You're seeing the European Union put laws and regulations into effect to tell corporations that if you screw this up and the data that you're entrusted with falls in the hands of unintended recipients, you can pay a $20 million fine or 4% of revenues, whichever is greater. And that's going into effect this month. That's called GDPR. Mm-hmm. So it's becoming more and more in the consciousness of the world that we need to have privacy in the cyber world. And up until now, it's been free love, peace, and happiness, and there's no bad guys, and nothing can go wrong. And openness is great, and it's going to make the world a better place. And now we're finding out that isn't always the case. So we need privacy.
I always use the term the Wild Wild West, but okay, free love that works too. And let's talk about
it's like San Francisco in the late '60s, right? Right. Everybody had this newfound freedom to do whatever they wanted, and there were no bad guys, and there were nothing could go wrong. And then all of a sudden, guess what? The bad guys moved in because it was just too easy.
Right. And so let's talk about, kind of what you guys do with, identifying a machine and talk about why that's so important, because that's something that I guess up until this point, and trust me, I've talked to a number of security professionals, and they're all about identifying the people using the machines. They're talking about, sourcing the location of traffic, but at the same time, not really trying to discern, whether or not, what the machine is, just is it a legitimate, I had to say, call to action, but, like a system in Bangalore, India is not going to be, someone that you expect from Kansas. It's just, that's how they kind of identify systems. It's not about the machine. It's about the location. It's about the person that's originating the request for information or access or what have you. Talk about why you decided that machine identity protection is important rather than individual credentials instead of identifying people. Are people, just kind of too transient, too fluid to really monitor compared to machines?
So think of the power of machines and how that's increased over the last 10 years. The capability of machines, how that's increased over the last 10 years. The jobs machines now do, how that's increased. We as humans tend to think we're the masters of the universe. We are the ultimate species, and we have never been challenged intellectually. We've been challenged physically with shovel, with a backhoe, with a bulldozer, with whatever, but we've never been challenged intellectually. Mm-hmm. Now there are machines that can do a lot of things we used to be able to do better than we can do them. And a lot of this isn't visible. That's the other thing. Humans are visible. We know usernames and passwords. We see people. But there's this whole backbone of the internet that's not visible. And so there's a big blind spot here. And if you just think of what the power of machines are, if they're driving a car, for example, we're talking about a machine, which is going to be a piece of software driving a car. And we license humans to do that. We test them. We all know how each other's going to act because we know what skin we have in a game. Are we not going to want to do the same thing for whatever's driving that car? Are we going to want to know that car, if a truck pulls out in front of it, is going to swerve to avoid the truck and not actually ram into the truck and kill the occupants of the car to save the 10 people on the sidewalk? How are we going to identify what it is that's driving that car? And I'm using just that as an example, right, but there's thousands of examples like that. So the machine capability now, we need to identify it. Now, let me put another one on the table, which is pacemakers installed in people's bodies. How do you know where that came from? Was that a false pacemaker? Was it a knockoff made in another country? How do you know that the software that gets uploaded to it actually is trusted software? It came from a source you trust. All these things require machine identities. How do you know that the website you're talking to is actually your bank instead of something else? And so if we don't put identities on these machines and then just make sure that those machines are identified just like humans are, because they're both actors, and we're equivalent. In some ways, we're less equivalent than a machine. This is a new world that's on us, and a lot of people really think today that humans are in control of all these machines. And there will come a day when we are not able to turn machines off. I mean, that will happen.
It's probably already.
Think about it today.
Yeah,
it's happening, right? So all you'll be able to do is then say to the machines that are in your control, don't trust that machine. That machine's still going to try and do stuff, but just don't trust it.
So
right? You're going to have to be able to identify it as something that you can't trust. That's why identities are so important.
Right, and here's to bring it to websites, and I'm sure it's only partially related, but the recent HTTP to HTTPS, you had I believe SSH certificates, blah blah blah. Essentially, you had some other entity say that I'm issuing you a credential, I'm issuing you a certificate, and me as a third party, I say they are who they say they are, and your computer goes out, checks the certificate, I'm assuming at some point, and bing bang boom, you are now on a verified website. That was a recent change that had to happen, blah blah blah. My question is that third party, I'm sure Venafi, I'm sure you're lovely people, very very trustworthy, but my question has always been with the third party and that system where you have large organizations that that will issue certificates, give them $10, and in some kind of backroom deal, they'll give you a certificate, or you could even do it yourself. You can actually set up to, issue yourself a certificate through another service. I mean, what's all this talk of identity and trustworthiness and verifying. How do you see that playing out over the next couple of years? Is it explicitly through companies such as yourself that are trustworthy, or should there be like a central database, I guess?
So, couple things. We do not create machine identities. There are companies that do that. They're like, used to be Symantec, now DigiCert, Entrust, Komodo, Global Sign, GoDaddy. They make those. And what all of our customers do will either use the machine identities that come from those companies, or they will create their own. In any case, and I'll just give you an example to tell you the state of the industry. And I was with the CISO of a very large retailer, very popular name. Everybody knows it, about a week ago. And I asked him, I said, so what kinds of machine identities do you allow in here? And he said, we have a firm policy that you can only get them from these two companies. And so I just showed him this little report that showed that he had machine identities operating on his network that came from 20 different companies, 18 which of them he forbid. He didn't have any visibility into that. So we brought him visibility into that. He didn't. The other thing is he didn't know, or they didn't know what the strength of the encryption was, how strong that identity was. And we showed him a whole bunch of weaknesses. And then he didn't know who the owners of those things were. So if he did want to get back to a person, he couldn't tell. And it was like, I said, what if those were humans and you had those problems with humans? He said, I'd have to shut this place down. He said, I've got to think right now, do I have to shut this place down because of what you just showed me regarding machine identities? And so it was a light bulb came on for him that they got very little control over what people can do in their organization, and then how that impacts all of their customers. So it was just a really good example for this conversation.
Yeah, no, it really goes to show, and I have no doubt that that a lot of organizations, I mean, even scarily enough up to the federal level, would kind of find themselves in the same, in the same boat.
You're exactly right. Yeah. You're exactly right, then.
Right. So, I mean, we're actually about to head off into break here, Jeff. This half hour has just flown on by. Would you mind staying over for just a couple minutes so we can wrap up this and talk a bit more about your surveys?
I'd be happy to.
Oh, great. Yep. So everyone, we are talking to Mr. Jeff Hudson. He is the CEO of Venafi. You can find more at venafi.com or head on over to computeramerica.com where, hey, we have a link directly to the website. So the music right there means that we're going to take a break. Everyone stay tuned. More Computer America as we wrap up this interview and also get into computer and technology news later on. So everyone stay tuned. More Computer America right after this.
Greece is cheap.
But the airfare costs a fortune.
Paris?
Not much closer, and again, airfare...
What about Puerto Vallarta?
Let's face it, flying anywhere is just too expensive.
Wait, what's this? Low-cost airlines.
With one call to low-cost airlines, you'll drastically slash your travel costs. We're talking insanely low airline prices to any of your favorite destinations. Where would you like to go? London, Rome, Costa Rica, Australia?
Wow, that's cheap.
So why wait? Call now to learn how crazy cheap it is to fly anywhere in the U.S. or international. Our prices are so low, we can't publish them. The only way to get them is to call to instantly hear the most amazing best deals on airline travel. It's that easy. So call now and start packing.
800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. That's 800-215-4461.
We are all Brother Wolf. 10 years ago, a group of locals banded together to create positive change. We took animals into our homes, held adoption events at local retailers, and talked to the community about our mission to help build a no-kill Asheville. A decade later, we have achieved so many victories for animals in need. There's been so much progress, yet there's still so much to do. As part of our year-long celebration, we encourage you to become a member of our special Compassionate Circle program. With a monthly donation of $10 or more, you will have behind-the-scenes access to the work we are doing at Brother Wolf. Our goal is to reach 1,000 members because we receive no government funding. Working together, we can help build and sustain no-kill communities. Learn more at compassionatecircle.bwar.org. We are a 501c3 tax-deductible organization.
And welcome back to the Computer America Show. It is 32 minutes past the hour as we continue on here. And by the way, if you missed any part of the program, if you're just joining us, first of all, welcome. And second of all, please feel free to head out to wherever podcasts are heard. And after today's live program, you can, of course, find the entirety of today's show at, iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, what have you. And you can find it all right there. So, just simply the radio show in podcast form. So continuing on with us is Mr. Jeff Hudson, and he is the CEO of Venafi. And we've been talking about security and the idea of machine identity. And, this is, like I said, this is a pretty new subject for me, and I'm liking this a lot. So one thing that I want to ask you, Jeff, before we go any further, there was an article yesterday about a certain president of the United States not wanting to use basic security features of his iPhone because he felt that they were cumbersome, they were annoying, and he'd rather not.
They were inconvenient.
Inconvenient. That was the word. And, not to pick on the president, but a lot of people out there. We always say that the antithesis to security is ease of use, where if something is more secure, it's harder for the everyday person to actually use. And everyone has their own level of, what is just insurmountably annoying. But talk about your idea of machine identity and how that works into, I guess, a workflow or identifying oneself. I mean, because you could, give everyone a label and say you have to verify yourself every 10 seconds. And, maybe for the workforce, that is just so annoying, they circumvent it or they go around it. It's just not usable. So, does your technology kind of get out of the way and still stay secure, or are you finding it hard for people to, kind of follow your guidelines?
Well, so the thing is, machines aren't lazy. Machines don't, get tired. They don't take vacations. They don't say, oh, that's too hard. I don't want to do that. They don't get all self-righteous about this is inconvenient. Machines, as capable as they are, actually act in a relatively predictable way given a certain set of inputs and what you know about them. So the whole notion of protecting machine identities and causing machines to have to follow a very strict set of rules on which machines can access which other machines totally makes sense. It's totally doable. And it's why it's completely different than human identity protection. Machine identity protection is something that has to be in the foundation of every single network.
Well,
now, as it relates to humans saying it's inconvenient, I get it. You know what? It's inconvenient to if I want to go get something at a 7-Eleven store late at night, a dangerous part of town, and that's the one I'm close to. It's inconvenient for me to have to think about not pulling up in front of that 7-Eleven and walking in and getting it, but my safety's at risk potentially. So does anybody know that there's danger in this internet we've created? There's a ton of danger. And people are just saying, oh, it's inconvenient for me. Well, okay, that's a trade-off you make. You're going to be safe or are you going to be inconvenient? Well, it's got to be inconvenient for this president to have all the security around him that he has to protect his body, yet it's too inconvenient for him to use a device that is safe. I don't get it, right?
Yeah.
I think it's just, but it's a proxy for a large number of people in this world.
Right.
They don't think about any danger in the internet, and it is a dangerous place, and it is also a beautiful, wonderful place. We just have to be careful. We realize it's a dangerous neighborhood. That's all.
Yeah, I guess a point that would have been more relevant to what Venafi does. I'm reading your website. 4 out of 5 top U.S. retailers secure with Venafi, and you mentioned here that you protect the point of sale, which is great because one of those levels of inconvenience was actually debit cards and the idea of the chip and things like that, and actually going from just swiping the magnetic strip to using the chip. Like even though it took on average something like 9 extra seconds, people were actually turning away from it. Retailers were going away. I guess my question for you is that when you try to focus on security, how much of it is also in the vein of this has to work quickly? This has to be very efficient in security. It can't just be, making sure it's perfect 100% of the time, but also it's very quick 100% of the time.
Right. So therein lies the real challenge for everybody in the world, which is to make things secure and still work, and work in ways that people want them to work. So the best security in the world?
What's that?
Is you just turn off everything. You just turn everything off. It's very secure.
Yeah.
And so that's at one end of the spectrum. The other end is there's zero security. Nothing's safe, but it's really convenient and easy to use until you get attacked or until your data is stolen. So there is a slider switch that you have to move, because in the world of security, we think things have got to be confidential. Makes sense, right? You don't want it stolen. It's got to have integrity. You don't want it changed on you. And it's got to be accessible. You got to be able to get to it. And if you're not secure, a lot of times bad guys will do what we've heard of DDoS attacks, right? DDoS attacks, ransomware. How good is your system or your device? What if ransomware shows up on one of those devices that the president is reportedly using?
Right.
What happens then? And so how important is security? Well, this is where we've got to look at the risk. Now, he is making a risk-based decision based on his convenience. That's an uninformed decision. because he's not actually looking at the risk. He's just saying it's inconvenient. And most people do it that way, actually.
Right.
But big corporations look at it and say, you know what, this is pretty risky here, so let's put some controls in place. And this one's not so risky, so we're not going to worry about it. But they spend a lot of time thinking about how do I make it convenient, how do I make it easy to use, how do I make it fast, but how do I make it secure enough so that it's still going to work.
So,
right? And people are going to use it. So it's a real art.
So, and I could probably dig up out of my dusty brain another 5-10 examples. I have yet to hear a resolution from the city of Atlanta about their ransomware problem. There are numerous cases, National Health Services that were struck with ransomware. I mean, you also have to contend with an aging technology backbone that still uses Windows 95 if you're lucky, and known vulnerabilities are out there, but security patches just aren't coming out anymore. And it's
but look at why are people still using that? That's a really good question. Why? It's
cost,
because they don't value security enough. And what that means is they don't spend enough money to secure. So if you got all this Windows 95 stuff out there, I would say whoever's using it that's getting benefit from that, you don't get to take all that savings and put it to the bottom line. You don't get to take all that savings and hire more people. What you have to do is you have to realize that you got to spend more money than you're spending now to secure the infrastructure. And I do believe, and this is not like crying wolf, but I think we are underspending on security on a worldwide basis by a factor of 2.
Really?
I think if you look at any system and how much energy you have to put into it to secure it, we're about spending about half as much as we need to. And the bad guys know this, and they're winning. And we're just not spending enough. That's a great example. Patching. Why didn't they patch? It's too hard. I don't have enough machines in place to patch. I don't have the bandwidth to get better machines, get better networks. Well, that costs more. That's the cost of doing business in the internet. You've got to make it safe and secure.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
No, and I believe luckily for you and a lot of people, other companies in your industry, that spending on security and cybersecurity is definitely increasing. I think high-profile breaches. Hey, let's face it. People are reactionary when they see the backlash that they got that Equifax got. I think a lot of companies sat up and said, "Could this be us? Like, could that be us next week?" In the headlines, plastered all over. And I think that your message is really starting to to make an effect. So I think we're going to wrap up this conversation with one more question for you, and then I can kind of tie this into the future of machine identity, because we mentioned the Internet of Things, the idea that everything is connected at some point to the internet, be it through sensors, be it through just a login place, just something that communicates or gets signals from somewhere over the internet. In a lot of your industries that you mentioned, everything from financial to healthcare to insurance, a lot of these places are going to talk with machines that, first of all, they kind of need to verify that yes, they're getting constant feedback from, but also that there's going to be a lot more web traffic. There's going to be a lot more places that I guess someone could hide in the in the noise and actually do some harm, steal some data, do what have you. What is the future when you were talking in the last 5 years, we've seen acceleration that we haven't seen ever. And I got to be honest with you, I think you could agree with this. That's not slowing down. It's not, we're not hitting peak productivity and we've just capped out on the numbers of computers we have. It's only going to get worse. What is the future of the Internet of Things in these industries?
Well, so when you have all these devices, things that are connected to the network and that can act alone or in unison, you got to think of an analogy to say, okay, so what's this like? Because nobody can wrap their mind around it. Nobody can understand when you have 100 million or 1 billion cameras out there that all have a lot of intelligence in them now, all can be loaded with all kinds of programs to do all kinds of things. What can they do? And then how do you kind of guard against that? And so if we look at the human realm that we know, what we do is we say, okay, all these people can be in this room, or all these people can be in this building, or be in this stadium, or be in this country because they've shown an identification that says they have authorization to do that. I think we're moving to a place where there will be some form of legislation that says you can't just snap any IoT device onto the network. It's going to have to either go through some form of certification. It's going to have some kind of licensing, because as our whole world moves into the internet, how can we possibly say it's okay for any device manufactured in any country at any time to snap on the internet and potentially bring the whole darn thing down? How can we let that happen when goods and services don't move, money doesn't move, healthcare doesn't get delivered? We're not going to let that happen. We're going to maintain some kind of an orderly society. There's going to be some kind of legislation. And the sorry thing is, it doesn't have to be that way, but industry is so brain dead on this. People are just rushing devices out into the marketplace without adequate safeguards, controls, and testing, because they want to get great features out there because they want it to be the most convenient thing. They want to go sell it to the guy that wants convenience. And if I got better features for convenience than somebody else, that person's going to buy mine. And if I have to delay it a month to make sure it's safe and secure, then the other guy beats me to market. And because humans are what they are, they'll buy the inconvenient thing. So I think we'll establish some baseline that says it's got to be at least this safe.
Right. Because
if it isn't, we're going to have chaos. So that's where I think this goes, actually.
Right. And I think another part of that is, of course, that those have to be internationally recognized, because we noticed that you were talking about 1 billion cameras. That's no joke. There are internet connected security cameras, web cameras that, that are registered all the time that have default password or even no password. And that's where we see the DDoS attacks come from that are, 1 billion devices strong. It's
You're exactly right. Yeah.
And really, I mean, we go to CES all the time and we talk to these companies, the big ones, and they're like, how do you handle security? And they're like, we got it under control. And it's like, that doesn't answer the question. And they're like, we got it. And then, stuff hits the fan. But, they
don't have it. I'm right here to say they don't have it. I've been in high tech my whole life. Security is always a second or third item on the agenda. It is never number one. And a lot of times it just falls off and people say, we'll come back and get that next time around. They don't have it.
So I'll let you have the last word. Okay. Let's pretend that you are talking to every one of these, large companies that are having to deal with this. What is your kind of pitch to say, other than the doomsday scenario where everything you know and love is going to come crash and burn? I mean, how do you convince these people to say security is, paramount?
All security starts with identity. In the past, we used to say, let's put a perimeter up, put up firewalls, and make sure nobody gets inside that's not allowed. Mm-hmm. Those are gone now. We have things in the cloud. We have things on mobile devices. We have Internet of Things. There is no perimeter security anymore. The best we can do now, in fact, the only thing we can do now is say, let's identify all those things that can have access. And so identity is security. And identity means identifying people, and it means identifying machines. Machines broadly defined as devices, cloud workloads, et cetera, virtual machines, et cetera. Without securing those identities, you can't have a secure network. And by the way, there isn't one CISO in the world that doesn't agree with that. And that's why our business is growing very rapidly, because we're kind of unique. We see this differently, and we've created the technology. We've won a ton of awards. We've got a lot of patents. And it's because we're helping the world be a safer place, because we know machine identities need to be protected just like human identities.
Right. And I'm sorry, one more question I have to ask you. We've been, poking around your website while we've been talking, and machine identity protection for dummies. Obviously, New York Times bestseller. Congratulations. But I mean, is that a joke or is that real? Is that something you recommend people pick up?
No, it's very real. And there's the For Dummies series, and we worked with the company that produces those, and we wrote a book, Machine Identity Protection for Dummies. We kind of created the category and the description of this problem, and everybody else before would talk about it in really technical terms, and nobody understood it. So we wrote this book to explain it, and it's on our website. It's a free download, electronic download for anybody that wants to go get it, and it's a quick read. It's written so everybody can understand it. And our objective there is one thing. It's to educate people about the importance of protecting machine identities to the security of the world we live in.
Very cool. Yeah. So, and like I said, we have a link to Venafi or Venafi.com right there in the show notes. And I got to say, this has been a very enjoyable almost hour. I apologize for asking you to stay over, but I'm glad that I did. And Jeff, thank you so much for joining us here on Computer America.
Ben, I've really appreciated the conversation, and thanks for all you do for helping the world understand. And I hope we get a chance to talk again soon.
No, that would be great. And yeah, definitely looking forward to what you guys are doing over there. And, hey, keep those surveys coming. They're important. So everyone, one more time,
Alrighty.
Jeff Hudson, CEO. Jeff, have a great day.
Thank you very much, Ben.
All right, bye-bye. All right, everyone. So there he goes. A lot of fun, and that was actually a lot of fun to talk about. But hey, let's go from the future needs securing to, hey, what's happening today and the future of tomorrow. Let's talk about computer and technology news. And once again, this is brought to you by OWC. If you haven't checked them out, Otherworld Computing, OWC.com. And yeah, that is... Wow, no, I take it back. OWC.com is not where you want to go. It's, let's see, the World Computing. There we go. Yeah, it's MacSales.com. There we go. Or OWC Digital. OWC.com does not take you to the right place. OWCDigital.com. And they have a lot of great products, very sleek, very Apple-esque, if that happens to be your, your go-to style. And you can definitely check that out. So there's that. All right, so everyone, here we go. Computer and technology news. As soon as I hit the button, we hit the button. All right, so obviously our guest ran over, and that is okay. It's just like your cup runneth over, but that just means that we aren't going to be able to get to all of these. So if you want to check out some of the other stories, you can of course check out computeramerica.com in the show notes. Lots of stories, but we're going to start with this one because I really do think, despite some of the other big news stories, this may be one of the biggest. So this is from Ars Technica, Mr. John Brodkin, and Comcast, you know them, confirms plans to buy 21st Century Fox and control of Hulu. So here you go. This is, so they say that Comcast is preparing to outbid Disney in an attempt to expand its media empire. This is getting insane. Because where maybe you had, a dozen major networks, now you have really Comcast, 21st Century Fox, and Disney. And those even seem to be getting slimmer and slimmer by the year, each one taking over each other. And I wouldn't be surprised if in the next couple of years, if something doesn't happen legislatively, we could be down to just a few actual content providers that could compete on this large, massive scale. So let's get into this and what they're actually buying, where Comcast today said it is preparing an offer to buy major portions of 21st Century Fox. And they said that the Walt Disney Company has an offer of $52.4 billion all-stock deal to buy 21st Century Fox properties. But Comcast was rumored to be lining up a $60 billion with a B, billion dollar in financing in order to make a hostile bid for Fox's assets. And Comcast announced today, well, they confirmed it. So, they announced that Comcast is considering and is in advanced stages of preparing an offer for the businesses that Fox has agreed to sell to Disney. And they said that Fox properties for sale do not include assets such as Fox News Channel, so Fox News, not on the table. Fox Business Network, which is kind of an offshoot of Fox News, does the same kind of role, but purely from a, business standpoint. And the Fox Broadcasting Company, so the overarching company over those. So they said that those properties would be spun off into a company being referred to as New Fox, so New Fox. And Comcast would acquire 21st Century Fox after the spinoff. So everything from their animated shows to Fox to FX to FXX or whatever the heck they call it, to all of their animated shows, programming, their movies, things like that. A lot up for grabs. $60 billion potentially up for grabs. And another part is that Fox, of course, has a 30% stake in Hulu. And if you don't recall them, Hulu actually has a pretty mixed pedigree where Fox owns 30%, Comcast owns 30%, Disney owns 30% of Hulu, and then 10% is owned by, I want to say, like Time Warner, although they got purchased by Charter. But anyways, so very mixed pedigree. And if any one of those companies, including Fox, is purchased by Comcast, then that gives Comcast control over Hulu. Before, it's been kind of a collaborative effect. And if you're wondering, yes, this is why a lot of Fox programming has been removed from Netflix, is because, if you're wondering why a lot of Disney, Fox, and Comcast programming has been removed from Netflix, this is the reason why. They won't make deals outside of a company that they already control. Anywho, separately, Comcast is trying to buy Sky, the British pay TV company, where after an initial review, a British government official said that the government is unlikely to challenge a Comcast-Sky merger. So Sky, hugely popular over in Europe, and this is a lot of money to throw around. Obviously, they have to get the money from somewhere, but if they were to do this and they tie up a bid for Fox as well as Sky within the same year, Comcast is going to be, I really didn't think of a world possible where you could be bigger than Disney, but that would put Comcast above Disney in terms of assets and, actual programming. So, again, whether or not you find it appealing that certain companies are going to get commanding shares in other companies, hey, it doesn't really matter. They're starting to merge. So there you go. All right, so there's that. Why don't we go ahead and move on to our last news story of the day. And let's see, come on, there has to be a really interesting one that we can kind of do here for you folks. That one is really interesting. All right, we're going to try. We're going to try to do this one where, I take it back. So tomorrow, I promise, we'll talk about Apple and their new processors. But just real quick, just to touch on this because we touched on it last segment, and this from the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which is again an organization that tries to protect digital rights, tries to define what a digital citizen is and what rights a digital citizen should have in this new world of technology. And one thing that they like to do is, legally speaking, a lot of FOIA requests, a request for information. And, one of them was over a claim by the FBI at a conference saying that they had almost 8,000 phones that they could not gain access to. And they wanted more information on that, as well as, kind of how that was to come about. Well, they said, the number was actually inflated by, in some reports, 550%. So they are making their points through hyperbole. Not something you want to see. So everyone, there we go. That's about all the time we have here for today. I want to thank you so much for tuning into Computer America. And if you want to find more about us, head on over to computeramerica.com and be sure to catch us here live Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern. And, hey, a lot of great guests, a lot of great news, and your comments. If you want to feel like joining us in the twitch.tv/Computer America, you can talk directly to us as we get things done. So everyone, until next time, have a great day. Thank you so much. And, by the way, tomorrow on the program, let me get this right, we'll be talking to a company called Data Locker. So we should be all set to go. Data Locker, a lot of fun, everyone. Bye-bye.